Hello, denizens. I always do my live take on Apple presentations. Maybe you've seen the most recent one, because it's fun to do it live and it gets my brain parts working harder than usual. But then there is a period of contemplation where the bigger picture starts to sink in. So now that all of my bigger pictures have sunk, I thought I'd appear here on my channel and make sounds come out of my mouth. One thing that has become clear to me is that the Apple brand is burning so intensely they can make money on pretty much anything. Apple has not shaken things up with much of anything groundbreaking in some time, and yet it has entered this Goldilocks zone where their stock value is going up and up. How is this happening when the tech press is lukewarm on Apple? It's happening because most regular human beings don't watch YouTube tech videos or read reviews. We have been here before, back when Apple released the underwhelming Trash and Tosh Mac Pro back in 2013, and then released a Mac Mini in 2014 that was worse than its predecessor. Then there was nothing. I talked about it in one of my videos. The iPad was supposed to be the post-computer computer, and Apple drank its own Kool-Aid and was completely uninterested in the Mac line, save for making MacBook Pros with the shittiest keyboard in the history of computing this side of the IBM PC Junior's chiclet keyboard and the Atari 400's membrane keyboard. I posited in that video that if Apple had lost interest in the Mac, then just let it go. Sell it to another company who cared. In another video, I mentioned that Apple was brand raping many of its customers. Yeah, sure, caveat emptor and all that, I know. And by the way, caveat was my favorite Roman emperor. But if your brand promise is computers for the rest of us, you're kind of telling people to trust you. So when you're delivering a base model computer with only 4 gig of RAM, when the minimum for sane and useful operation was 8 gig, then I think you're abusing your brand, which Apple did and does now, but to a lesser degree. And I would argue spending too much on a useful computer is not a crime, but selling a computer that can't execute basic tasks is. Any 2 gig MacBook Air owners out there? November is coming, and the rumor is that Apple will finally introduce its Apple Silicon Mac. What kind of Mac will be the first to get the bionic treatment? Who knows? The expectation is that this will be the start of Apple's relentless march throughout its product stack until all Macs are bionic. With Intel out of the picture, that's a total lock-in. Will Apple abuse this position of trust that we are bestowing upon it? Yes, I'm fairly certain that they won't be able to stop themselves. Now, this is not the same as when Apple went PowerPC. Apple was not a dominant player. Apple had to beg developers to build software for it. Same when Apple moved to Intel. Many big names took a wait-and-see attitude. Quark Express, for instance, much to its chagrin. But this is a very different Apple. It announced proudly at the most recent event that it will save the planet by not including chargers with their iPhone 12s, ostensibly because there are already billions of tiny, square, white charging bricks fallen between couch cushions. Apple is going to supply a Lightning to USB-C cable. That will certainly come in handy when you want to connect to all your USB-A Apple charging cubes. I think that's just bad. And the fact that Apple forced that real-looking woman onto the roof of Apple's HQ to expound on the ecological benefits of this emission was evil, especially when all the skinny presenters got to be inside. Do we continue to trust Apple as they tighten the technological noose around our wallets? Once full conversion to Apple Silicon is complete, will the promise of timely CPU updates continue? If Apple wanted processor progress, why didn't they just add AMD processors to their lineup? Wouldn't it have been great to have a Mac running on a 5950X or even a Threadripper? But that's never going to happen. It's Apple Silicon all the way, with the big questions surrounding discrete GPUs. Well, that's not been addressed at all. Can Apple's GPU program match NVIDIA's? I highly doubt it. And while we're discussing trusting Apple, that promised expandable Mac Pro is also a bit of a sham. It's not really. Lots of proprietary bits and pieces in there. It will be interesting to see if those ridiculously overpriced graphics modules are going to be upgraded with the latest AMD GPUs. So, in 2 years, when you have invested in an Apple Watch that requires a metal sensor to be bored into your wrist for continuous bone marrow sensing, and Apple AR optic nerve glasses, HomePod mini, iPhone, EarPods, cochlear implants, as well as your new Apple Silicon MacBook Pro and iMac, none of which will work with anything else out there outside of the Apple ecosystem. Will you be happy? How much of that software that you need will be ported? What kind of burden will that put on application developers? Presently, they are able to compile their Mac and Windows applications knowing that Intel was at the core of both OSs. I have no idea, but I can't imagine that this split will be Funsville for developers. Apple said that the shift will take 2 years. Sorry, Apple will not sell enough Apple Silicon boxes to replace the installed base of Intel Macs anytime soon. That's going to take a decade. Presently, Apple is doing this bi-directional thing where Intel Mac software will work on Apple Silicon Macs using Rosetta 2, and Apple Silicon apps will use Catalyst to work on Intel Macs. Apple said the transition will be 2 years. I'm assuming they meant Rosetta 2 will be abandoned, but Big Sur and maybe another OS or 2 update will continue the useful life of Intel Macs. For all intents and purposes, Intel Macs will be supported for maybe 5 years from the time the last one leaves China's sweatshop. But do you trust Apple? And the bigger question is, what are you actually trusting Apple to do? A lot of this trust is our feelings. We have this notion that we know better what the right thing is to do. That's our mania. It's our fault, not Apple's. How many care that Apple will be the cleanest computer company in the world? I think that's important. But is it more important than Apple fighting right to repair? Is it more important than ditching Lightning, the Lightning cable, and moving to USB-C? Let's not be naive. While the upfront cost is probably significant, and only one that a giant company like Apple could bear, but if going off-grid did not represent a massive long-term cost savings, Apple would not be doing it. The added bonus is that it makes for great PR. Apple is going to be an even more closed system in the not-too-distant future. Do you trust them? I would like to make one request regarding comments. I'd really like to hear from people who have invested in Apple gear and its ecosystem and are planning on investing in the future. If you're a Windows or Linux user, there's little value in telling us you're not using Macs and maybe we should switch. It's so funny when you do that. Thank you, denizens. Till next time. What is it, Wancho? Oh, you're using a Tandy TRS-80 still with a 300 baud modem. Well, that's going to add to the discussion significantly. So long, everyone.